There is a version of you walking around right now, wearing your face, using your voice, making your decisions, and it is the reason your life looks the way it does. Not your circumstances, not your childhood, not the economy. This version of you has to die, and today I'm going to show you exactly how to kill it. Picture it for a second. It's 11 p.m., you said yes to something you didn't want to do, again, and you're lying in bed replaying it, hating yourself a little. That's not weakness of character. That's a specific, identifiable version of you running the show, and later I'll show you why most people try to destroy this version of themselves the obvious way, through sheer willpower and self-discipline, and why that approach almost guarantees it comes back stronger than before. Before we go further, type weak self in the comments if you know exactly which version of you I'm talking about. You already know the moment. It's not dramatic. It's Tuesday morning, and your alarm goes off, and some small, tired voice in you negotiates for 9 more minutes, and you let it win. And you already feel the day tilting against you before your feet hit the floor. It's the meeting where you had the better idea and said nothing. It's the group chat where someone makes a joke at your expense and you laugh along instead of saying anything. It's calling your mother back 3 days late because some part of you resents how easily she can still make you feel small. None of these moments are catastrophic on their own. That's exactly the problem. They're small enough to ignore, which means you never stop to ask who inside you keeps making these choices. Here's the cost, and it's not abstract. Every time this weaker version of you wins one of these small moments, you pay in self-respect a currency that doesn't replenish on its own and that you can't fake your way back into. You start to notice a gap between the person you privately believe you could be and the person your actual daily choices describe. That gap doesn't stay quiet. It shows up as low-grade resentment toward people who didn't even do anything to you. It shows up as exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix, because it isn't physical. It's the fatigue of constantly managing an internal argument you never actually resolve. Time passes strangely inside this pattern. 2 years can go by where you technically did things, but nothing changed, because the same version of you was making the same trades the entire time. Marcus Aurelius kept returning to one idea, over and over, in his private notes to himself, that a person's inner life is the one territory that is always fully under their own command, no matter what happens outside it. He wasn't writing that as comfort. He was writing it as an accusation. If your mind is genuinely the one thing you control completely, then the version of you that keeps folding, keeps shrinking, keeps choosing the easy exit, that's not happening to you. You're the one keeping it alive. And once you actually sit with that, it stops being a philosophical idea and starts being uncomfortable in a very personal way, because it means the weak version of you isn't a mask life put on you, it's a resident you've been feeding. So here's the actual idea underneath everything I'm going to walk you through. You do not improve the weak version of yourself, you end it. There's a habit most self-help content sells you, which is optimization, tweak the morning routine, add a habit tracker, read one more book, and slowly sand down the rough edges of the person you already are. That's not what this is. This is not about editing a draft. It's about recognizing that the version of you who avoids hard conversations, seeks approval, and calls comfort peace is not a rough draft of the strong version. It's a completely different entity with different values, and you cannot negotiate it into becoming someone else. This does not mean self-hatred. It does not mean waking up tomorrow and violently rejecting everything about who you currently are, because that approach, and I promise you this will matter later, usually backfires in a very specific, almost mechanical way. This isn't about shame, and it isn't about becoming a colder, harder, less feeling person either. Killing the weak version of you is not the same as killing your softness, your empathy, or your capacity to care. Those aren't weaknesses. They're not what we're talking about. What we are talking about is the part of you that has quietly, socially been rewarded for staying small. Modern life doesn't just tolerate this weaker self, it applauds it. Being agreeable gets you called easy to work with. Avoiding conflict gets you called chill. Staying in your comfort zone gets rebranded as self-care. The version of you that's keeping you weak has an entire culture built around congratulating it for existing. That's exactly why it's still alive. Nobody in your life is currently incentivized to help you kill it. You are the only one. Let's get specific, because vague self-improvement talk is exactly how this weaker self survives another year unchallenged. The first place this version of you shows up is the easiest one to spot, and it's the one almost everyone recognizes immediately, the approval-seeking self. Think about the last time you agreed to help move someone's furniture on your one free Saturday, not because you wanted to, but because saying no felt like it would cost you something you couldn't name. You weren't being generous in that moment. You were making a withdrawal from your own account to make a deposit into someone else's opinion of you. Epictetus built almost his entire philosophy around one hard line. Some things are within your control and some things are not. And the moment you make your peace of mind dependent on something outside your control, like what someone thinks of you, you've handed them the steering wheel. Psychologically, this connects to something well documented called social comparison theory. We constantly, often unconsciously, measure our worth against the people around us. And the approval-seeking self is what happens when you outsource that measurement entirely, letting other people's reactions become the final word on whether your choice was correct. Here's the reframe: you don't need to become someone who doesn't care what people think. You need to become someone whose actions are decided before you check their reaction. Today, practice this once. Say no to one small, low-stakes request, out loud, without an apology attached to it. Not, sorry, I can't, maybe next time, just, I can't make that one. Notice how much of your discomfort was really about the outcome versus about simply not being liked for 1 hour by one person. Let me ask you something directly. When was the last time you did something hard specifically because it was hard and not because someone was watching? That question exposes the second version of you, and it's a level deeper than approval seeking, because this one operates even when nobody's watching at all. The comfort protecting self. This is the version of you that has quietly redefined peace to mean the absence of friction, so that any situation requiring effort, confrontation, or risk gets automatically filed under not worth it. But you see it in the workout you keep postponing until Monday, the difficult conversation with your partner you keep waiting for the right time to have, the business idea that stayed an idea for 3 years because starting it would mean risking looking foolish. Seneca wrote about this constantly. He pointed out that people guard their money and their property fiercely, counting every coin, but hand out their days for free to whoever asks, as if time were the one resource they'd never run out of. The comfort-protecting self runs on exactly that miscalculation. In psychological terms, this is loss aversion. In its purest form, we are wired to weigh potential losses roughly twice as heavily as equivalent potential gains. So the vague possible pain of trying and failing feels heavier on the internal scale than the very real, ongoing cost of never trying at all. The reframe here is blunt. Comfort isn't neutral. It's not a safe default setting you return to between efforts. Comfort has a price, and you've been paying it every single day without putting it on the ledger. Today's action. Pick the one task you've been waiting for the right time to start and do the very first physical step of it in the next hour. Not plan it, not research it, do it. Now here's where it gets less comfortable to talk about, because the next version of you doesn't look weak from the outside at all. It often looks like emotional intelligence. This is the victim narrator self, and it's the version of you that has gotten extremely good at explaining with total accuracy why things aren't your fault. Your parents didn't prepare you. Your industry is oversaturated. Your ex damaged your ability to trust. Here's what's dangerous about this one. Every single explanation might be completely true, and it still doesn't matter, because the moment an explanation becomes the reason you stay stuck, it stopped being an explanation and become a life sentence you wrote yourself. Marcus Aurelius made a distinction that most people skip past too quickly. He separated what happens to you from the judgment you attach to what happens to you, arguing that suffering usually comes less from the event itself and more from the story you build on top of it. This connects directly to a well-known psychological concept called locus of control. Whether you generally attribute outcomes in your life to your own actions or to outside forces, and decades of research consistently link a stronger internal locus of control to better resilience and follow through, not because external things don't exist, but because believing you have leverage is what makes you actually use whatever leverage you have. The reframe. Accurate is not the same as useful. You can be right about why something happened and still be the only person who suffers for insisting on being right about it. Today, identify one recurring explanation you give for a stuck area of your life, and for the next 24 hours, simply don't say it out loud, even if it's true, and notice what you do instead of explaining. Can I be honest with you about something most videos like this won't say? Everything I've just described, the approval seeking, the comfort protecting, the explaining, those are the accessible ones. Those are the versions of you that are easy to catch because they announce themselves. The next one hides better because it wears the costume of your actual personality. If you've made it this far, you already think differently than most people watching a video with this title because you're still here for the parts that ask something of you instead of just making you feel understood. Do me one favor before the second half, hit like on this now, not at the end, because it genuinely helps this reach the next person who needs to hear it. And stay with me, because I'm about to show you exactly why attacking this weak self head-on through pure willpower is the version of destroying it that backfires on almost everyone who tries it and what to do instead. The fourth version of you is the performing self, the identity you've built specifically to be looked at, whether that's on a screen, in a family role, or at work. This is subtler than approval seeking, because approval seeking wants a reaction. The performing self wants a reputation, a consistent image it can maintain across time. You feel this one when you post the version of your life that looks assembled, when you keep playing the reliable one in your friend group even while quietly drowning, when you can't admit you're struggling because it would contradict the role you've spent years building. Seneca warned specifically against living for an audience, noting that a person who arranges their whole life around being watched has built a home with no walls everyone can see in, and there's nowhere to actually rest. The psychological hook here is the spotlight effect, the well-documented tendency to drastically overestimate how much other people notice and remember about us. You are performing at significant personal cost for an audience that is far smaller and far less attentive than you believe. The reframe, the performing self, isn't protecting your reputation. It's what happens when you've quietly decided your reputation matters more than your actual life. Action for today. Tell one person, specifically, one true thing you've been performing your way around, not everyone, not publicly, just one person who deserves the real version. And now the sharpest one, the one that explains why the other four are so hard to actually kill even once you can name them clearly. The self-preserving self. This isn't a specific bad habit like the others. It's the mechanism underneath all of them, the part of you that experiences any real change to your identity as a threat to your survival. Because as far as your nervous system is concerned, who I am and what keeps me safe are the same file. This is why people sabotage their own success right after a breakthrough, why some part of you gets almost physically uncomfortable imagining yourself as genuinely powerful, decisive, unbothered, not because you don't want it, but because becoming it means the death of a self your mind has spent decades building elaborate defenses around. Epictetus made a claim that sounds simple until you actually apply it to yourself. You are not your body, your possessions, your reputation, or even your habitual patterns. You are the part of you doing the choosing, and everything else is just material you've been arranging. This maps onto something psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the deep discomfort we feel when our actions and our self-image don't match. And crucially, the mind's overwhelming tendency in that gap is not to change the behavior, but to twist the story until the old self-image feels true again. That's the trap. Today's action, and this one's uncomfortable, write one sentence describing who you'd be if you stopped protecting this current version of yourself and read it out loud, alone, once. Here's the paradox, and this is the part I promised you at the start. Most people who reach this point in a video like this go home and try to destroy their weak self through force, through discipline, through self-punishment, through telling themselves, I refuse to be that person anymore, and gritting their teeth through it. And it backfires almost every single time, and here's the mechanical reason why. The moment you declare war on a part of yourself, you have to keep watching for it in order to fight it. And psychologists have documented for decades that the harder you try to suppress or eliminate a specific thought or impulse, the more it intrudes. This is called the rebound effect of thought suppression, first shown in studies where people told not to think about something ended up thinking about it far more than people never given the instruction at all. So when you tell yourself with white-knuckled intensity, I will never people please again, you have just built a spotlight and pointed it directly at the people-pleasing self, feeding it the exact attention it needs to survive. This is why willpower-based transformation so often collapses after a few weeks into a worse relapse than where you started. You cannot destroy the weak version of you by fighting it. You destroy it by starving it of the one thing it needs to keep existing, your identification with it, and building a new identity so specific and so lived in that the old one simply has nowhere left to stand. You don't declare war on who you were. You become someone the old pattern doesn't recognize as home anymore. Picture the version of you on the other side of this. You wake up, and the first decision of your day isn't negotiated with a tired inner voice, you're just up. Because the person you've become doesn't run that negotiation anymore. Someone tests you in a meeting, subtly, the way people do, and you feel the old instinct to shrink flicker for exactly 1 second, and then it passes. Because it's a flicker now, not a flood. You say no to things without narrating the no. You have the hard conversation you'd been avoiding, and it's still hard. Your voice still tightens, but you have it anyway, because the version of you having it isn't the version who needed to avoid it. People around you notice something shifted, though most of them can't name what. The chaos doesn't stop, deadlines still hit, people are still difficult, mornings are still mornings, but you're not the same person absorbing it. You're steady in a way that isn't loud about itself. You stop performing being fine because you actually are, more often than not, and on the days you're not, you say so to the one person who's earned the truth. Here's your challenge, starting tomorrow for the next 7 days. Each morning, before you check your phone, name out loud which of these 5 versions of you is most likely to show up that day. The approval seeker, the comfort protector, the victim narrator, the performer, or the self-preserver. And make one decision that person wouldn't make, not a perfect week. One decision a day, that's it. Remember this line, because it's the whole video in one sentence. You don't fix the weak version of you, you stop feeding it, and you build someone it can't survive next to. If you're taking on this challenge, comment day 1 right now. That's how I know you're actually doing this and not just watching it. Subscribe if you want to keep building this person with me, one video at a time. Stay sharp.